welcome back. I am Largo, and today we are checking out another SCP video. Today it's going to be SCP-4666, the Yule Man. The holidays are coming up real quick. It's going to be Christmas soon, so why not do some Christmas SCPs? This video was a commenter suggestion, so thank you very much for that. As far as the title goes, the Yule Man, I don't really know. I mean, it kind of implies that it is Christmas themed, but other than that, I have no real idea. So let's go ahead and jump right into it and find out what SCP-4666, the Yule Man, really is.
SCP-4666, the Yule Man. One of the most effective techniques available to horror writers is taking something that is normally friendly or harmless and twisting it into something much darker.
Right.
Examples include a clown in Stephen King's It, children in The Omen or Children of the Corn.
Well, I mean, clowns and children are pretty terrifying to some people, so...
Or even a pet, like Cujo. The SCP universe has its fair share of this trope, and today we'll be looking at a particularly disturbing example involving both children and Christmas.
Okay.
SCP-4666 is currently uncontained by the Foundation, and their best hope currently is constant monitoring across the globe and suppression of any media coverage of the SCP or its actions. 4666 is believed to be, but not confirmed, an exceptionally long-lived humanoid entity. Witnesses describe it as a very tall, elderly male with an extremely emaciated appearance, always appearing completely naked. The Foundation believes that 4666 is capable of instantaneous or near instantaneous travel to any location north of 40 degrees north latitude, as that seems to be the only area of its influence, but it's possible it could travel anywhere in the world. 4666 is only seen during a specific time frame, from December 21st or December 22nd to January 1st or 2nd, and is only seen at night.
Okay, that's a pretty small time frame, to be honest. The 22nd to the 1st, and it only appears at a certain north of a certain latitude. So, okay, it seems to have a very specific, both, let's say, hunting grounds and a very specific hunting time or hunting season, if you will. It's almost a little bit self-contained in a certain way due to these restrictions that it seems to abide by. But all right, let's keep going. Let's get a little bit more info.
Over the course of 12 consecutive nights, 4666 will carry out a series of actions that have been dubbed Weissnacht events. Weissnacht meaning white night. During these events, 4666 will target one or more households, each bearing some similarities to one another. Each are in an isolated location, north of 40 degrees north latitude. Each are home to a family with at least one child under the age of 8, and each will have snow cover during the duration of the event.
Okay.
During the first...
Again, these are more very specific restrictions put on this. So if you live south of a certain latitude, you're okay. If it's not within this 12-day period, you're okay. If you don't have kids, you're okay. If it's not snowing, you're okay. So, okay, let's see what else.
7 nights of a Weissnacht event. Children in the homes being affected will begin to see 4666 outside of the home, watching them from a nearby field or edge of a forest. It has also been reported in some cases that affected children will wake up during the night to see 4666 watching them through a window.
Creepy.
Only children will notice this during this period. Over the following 4 nights afterwards, all family members will hear sounds of footsteps coming from the attic of the home or on the roof, and an extremely unpleasant odor will also frequently be smelled. Despite any efforts made, no cause for the footsteps or smell will be found, often leading to paranoia.
As it would.
Finally, on the 12th night, one of two scenarios will occur, with one of them far more likely, occurring in 85% of known cases. This more common scenario involves 4666 entering the family's home, incapacitating most of the family members, and herding them into a single room so that it can kill each of them in view of each other.
Oh.
The method of killing differs each time, but often involves some degree of torture beforehand. In a report from the late 1400s in Croatia, the killings were seen as ritualistic and paganistic, with a bishop believing them to be a part of a demonic ritual.
So it went from creepy to horrific real fast. Again, there's lots of restrictions put on this, but if you are unlucky enough to meet all of the qualifications for this, that seems pretty brutal, you know? It targets the entire family and intentionally kills them in front of each other. A little bit different than, a lot of horror things where it likes to separate you and eliminate you one by one away from the group. This is like the exact opposite. It wants everybody in the group to see what it's doing.
Another event involved a family being hung upside down from the ceiling, completely drained of blood.
Ugh.
In Germany in 1913, a family was found suspended on the walls of a stable with sharp implements forced through their palms and their tongues cut out.
Oh, okay.
Another family had their feet held over a fire until their bones were exposed and their heads were crushed, with hundreds of bite marks not matching any animal or human covering their bodies.
Ugh.
In Norway in 1971, a family was found in a basement, each with limbs forcefully pulled off, and each had sustained exactly 39 stab wounds. Their bodies had then been eviscerated, their intestines removed and cut into pieces, arranged around the bodies. Finally, in Iceland in 1996, a family of 9 had been found, with large pieces of skin removed and partially consumed from their backs, necks, and groins.
Okay, so it's definitely understandable why people would think that this is some kind of occult thing, because this is very clearly coming across a scene like this. For investigators, it would be clear as day that this was not done by an animal, and that the methods used here are very both intentional and torturistic, if you will. I don't even know if that's a real word, torturistic. It's very clear that these are meant to inflict lasting suffering. None of these seem like they would be quick, painless ways to go. Having your feet held over fire until the bones are exposed, that would take time and would hurt the whole time. Yeah, completely understandable why people would think that this has some kind of occult ritual almost thing going on for it. Even with the other instance they gave where everybody had specifically 39 stab wounds and they were all had that many, that's a pattern. So that leads a person to believe that this is not only intentional but specifically done with maybe some kind of intent or purpose behind it.
Each had then been decapitated with a bucksaw belonging to the family before their bodies were carried to their respective beds, and their heads placed on the staircase. While gruesome and horrific, the worst fact is that in each of these cases, the youngest child of the families had been abducted, each younger than 8 and most around the age of 3 to 5. We'll learn more about this in a moment, but in the other possible scenario, occurring 15% of the time, none of the family members are hurt. Instead, they will hear footsteps inside their home during the 12th night, and in the morning, the children will find presents at the foot of their beds, consisting of crudely made toys crafted from the remains of human children.
Whoa!
These toys vary wildly in form and composition, with some hardly considered to be toys at all. In Finland in 1811, a small wooden drum was found, with the top of the drum made from a stretched piece of child's skin and secured with thread made from human tendons. In Wales, a knife was found made from a single piece of bone from a child, and in Kazakhstan, a flute was found made from a hollowed-out femur bone belonging to a child, dyed in human blood. In Michigan in 1960, a box containing 13 miniature human figures was found, each made from the finger or toe bones of a child, and tied together with human tendons. The figurines were decorated with human hair and torn pieces of clothing, and DNA evidence revealed that parts of 18 different children were used to make the figurines.
My goodness.
In Canada, a ball made of 19 layers of human skin wrapped around the head of a child and secured with pine resin was found.
Wow. Man, I gotta take a second here to process this. Okay, so let's get this straight real quick. There are a number of restrictions for any of this to occur, right? You have to be above a certain latitude. It has to be within this 12-day period. It has to be a family with a child. There has to be snowfall, and the house has to be relatively separated from... the house has to be relatively isolated, so, it's not going to happen in a city setting. So with all these restrictions, there is two possible outcomes. The first and most likely outcome is that everyone in the household is terribly and brutally murdered in very horrific ways. When that happens, the youngest child, or maybe the only child in certain circumstances, is abducted. Now, if you're lucky enough to be one of the small percentage of people who does get visited by this Yule Man but doesn't get absolutely massacred, it's still going to make for a fairly unpleasant Christmas when you unwrap a gift and find that it's made of people, specifically children. Man, some of the things that they're listing off here, like a ball that's made out of multiple layers of skin wrapped around a head. I mean, good grief. I mean, this is some this is some real nightmare fuel type stuff. I mean, holy cow. Okay, all right.
And in the Netherlands, there was a hairbrush that used 43 human teeth in place of the bristles. Each tooth was found to belong to a different child, and only 2 of them matched known abduction victims of 4666.
Oh, wow, okay.
Despite events stretching back centuries, the Foundation only learned of SCP-4666's existence in 1974, but they began a worldwide search for past records of similar events. They now possess records showing Weihnacht events for nearly every year going back to the late 18th century. Although there's a possibility that 4666 has been active since the 2nd century, or even the 1st century BC.
Wow. If that's true, that would imply that Mr. Yule Man here is not specifically associated with the holiday of Christmas, but rather just the winter season.
Despite obtaining what seems to be 466's fingerprint at each of his crime scenes, it appears to be inhuman in design, and the Foundation is no closer to actually tracking the entity. They did, however, gain new insight into 4666 when they retrieved one of the kidnapping victims after a Weihnacht event in Alaska in 2018. This was one of those rarer events where the family was not killed, and gifts were left instead, one of which was a life-sized doll made from an emaciated female child. The girl was clothed in a dirty, crude dress that had been sewed into her skin in several places, and her mouth had been sewn shut using thread made from human tendons. Her lips were painted red with a substance primarily consisting of human blood, and 3 of her fingers were missing. The rest of her fingers had some other child's fingernails glued over her own and painted with the same blood solution. Her entire scalp had been removed, and another child's scalp placed where it was, with long blonde hair.
Oh my goodness.
Finally, both of her eyes had been removed and replaced with 2 large stones with crudely painted eyes on them. Upon examination, the child was revealed to be still alive and was airlifted to a hospital.
Oh my goodness.
2 Foundation agents were dispatched to the hospital and obtained an interview with the girl. The girl, age 7, was a known abduction victim taken from her home in Russia in 2016 after a Weissnacht event. She was severely malnourished, her body was covered in scars and burns, and she had suffered 2 bone fractures that had not healed properly. She originally spoke to the 2 agents in an unknown language, possibly pre-Proto-Germanic, before switching over to broken Russian. The girl's first concern was that she was going to be taken back to him, but after being reassured, she described the Weissnacht event that she had witnessed. She said that he hurt Mama and Papa and Katya and Juliana for a long time, and they were bleeding. After they stopped screaming, he put her in his bag, which contained other children as well.
Ugh.
She heard other people screaming as they went to other houses, and at each house he put another child in the bag. Afterwards, he took the children deep underground, somewhere very cold, and she says there were bones everywhere. There were apparently lots of children there, and a huge number of holes, each containing a group of children. The children are then responsible for making toys, and if you don't make the toys, you don't get to eat. She says if you stop making toys or fall asleep, he hurts you by hitting you, burning you, biting off your fingers, or even cooking and eating you. The girl personally witnessed 2 other children being eaten, and eventually she became sick and was unable to make toys any longer. The other children in her group were then forced to work on her instead, as she says, when you can't make the toys, you become the toys.
Man, this is like a crazy twisted version of like a combination between Krampus and Santa Claus, right? The whole child abduction, monstrous appearance, all of that is very Krampus-like, while the whole toy factory, building toys, all that kind of stuff, and then passing them out is very Santa-like. It's a weird combination of the 2 concepts put together in a very horrific fashion. And the fact that these children are not only abducted and tortured and turned into these toys, but they're forced to be the ones who actually make these toys. Insane. Just wow. This is one of the darker SCPs that I've heard about. Like, it's really dark, because it's one thing to have a monster that just kind of goes after you and gobbles you up or something, or this thing actively tortures and murders people in front of each other, presumably just for kicks, and then kidnaps children to put them into what is essentially a slave labor camp, coupled with torture and execution and being turned into toys. And then even after that happens to you, your terrible, mangled, dismembered corpse or pieces of it is then sent to other children to go traumatize those families. Like, this is so dark. This is so dark. It kind of puts some of these other SCPs to shame when it comes to the horror aspect of SCPs. But let's keep going.
The girl died shortly after the interview. So, 4666 is a bit of the movie Sinister, combined with the myths of Santa Claus and Krampus.
Right, yeah.
With a healthy splash of SCP thrown in. As I said, taking something normally cheerful, fun, and innocent, and twisting it into something dark and horrifying, is often quite an unsettling technique, and I think that's part of why 4666 works well. What exactly are the Yule Man's motivations for making such grotesque toys and leaving them behind? Will the Foundation ever manage to track down the Yule Man and his underground lair of grotesquerie? 4666 is one of the more disturbing SCPs on the site.
Yeah.
But if you don't live above the 40 degrees north line, you don't have to worry. Probably.
Alright guys, that was SCP-4666, the Yule Man, and my goodness, that is some absolutely horrific shit. So, let me just say that when it comes to the SCPs and a lot of the very horror-like things that a lot of the SCPs come with, this is definitely up there towards the top. It's certainly seemingly more almost evil and vindictive than a lot of the other SCPs. Sure, a lot of other SCPs are very brutal and very deadly and seem to do things that are horrific in nature, but this one is goes out of its way to be as terrible as possible, right? I mean, not only does it specifically target children, but entire families can be collateral damage for this thing. And there's actually very little information on the SCP itself. Most of the information that we know about it is just the aftermath of where it's been. Now, it is interesting that there are so many limitations that you have to live in a certain area. That area has to be cold enough to snow. There has to be active snowfall there, or at least recent snowfall. You have to be in an isolated location, and you've got to have children. So there's lots of requirements that seemingly need to be met before Mr. Yule Man here makes a visit to your home. But we also don't really know the decision-making process the Yule Man uses to say naughty or nice, per se. So, yeah, definitely leaves a lot of stuff open for questions, and is definitely one of the more brutal SCPs that we've seen. Brutal in both the nature in which it dispatches its victims, and brutal in the fact that it not only kidnaps children, but essentially puts them into, I guess the best wording for it would be a forced child labor concentration camp. Crazy SCP, guys. Really crazy SCP. Now, in the grand scheme of SCPs, this is a pretty solid one, honestly. If you're looking for an SCP that's very horror themed, then whew, the Yule Man, he's your guy. So anyways, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, go ahead and click that like button. Go ahead and consider clicking that subscribe button to continue getting more reactions like this. And as always, guys, leave a suggestion down below. What other SCPs should I check out? What other videos in general should I check out? Leave them in the comments and I can take a look at them. Thanks for watching the video. Thanks for stopping by. Take care of yourselves and have a great day.